Hi, I'm Anne-Marie. I think you already know that. Um, this is going to be a presentation relatively fast, giving you a good overview of the sampling process for the whole Small Firm Diaries project. There are 5 stages or 5 elements in the sampling process, and I'm going to tell you about each of the 5 elements. So the first stage is the small firm eligibility. Eligibility means that the small firms have to have certain characteristics to make it possible to select them for participation. The characteristics that we are looking for is a very important overall characteristic is that they should be from a sector which has potential for growth. That might be quite difficult to define, which, you don't know which sector is going to grow. One of the things that New York University team has done is to actually identify sectors that they consider survival sectors, survival business. These are retail, restaurants, cafes, bakeries, bars, and also very common type of services like barbers, hairdressers, motorbike repair. So all those survival businesses are not going to be part of this project. They are excluded. What is included is firms that hopefully will not only grow, we expect to grow in terms of profit, but also particularly that will grow in terms of number of workers so that they expand employment. And we will specifically select women-owned businesses. That is something we hope to get a good proportion in the sample. Now, of course, the study is called Small Firm Diary, so small firms. What is small? For this study, we only define that in terms of how many employees there are. And so that is 2 to 20 employees, and they should be non-household employees. You will get some different videos about that with more explanations. All the types of workers will be counted, part-time, temporary, casual, even people who work on a commission basis. They will be counted and proportionately to a full-time, long-term employee. The second stage of the sampling process is identifying areas. So we chose the locations. We had to choose 3 locations, and we wanted to get a good mix of the largest city. So the capital was obviously going to be included, and we wanted some smaller cities and towns. And we wanted as much of a spread across regions as possible. So we chose 3 regions, and of course it had to be feasible. And particularly we looked at current security levels and whether it was possible to travel between the areas easily and fast. So the first we chose was Addis Ababa. Obviously, it's the capital and it has many, many businesses. Secondly, we chose as an area the 2 cities, the 2 towns of Adama and Bishoftu. I think they are also called Nazrat and Debre Zeit. And finally, we selected Dire Dawa, which is actually a city region, and Adama and Bishoftu are in Oromia. So to show you on a map where these places are, this is a map of all of Ethiopia, and the box shows the area where we are going to do the study. And to see an enlargement of the box is this map. And so on the left, you see Addis Ababa, and quite close to that is the area of Bishoftu and Adama. And there's a small city in between, Mojo. There will also be some sampling in that location. And then on the right, far right, you see Dir Dawa as the third location. Now, once we had the locations, we had to decide in which areas of those locations we were going to do interviews, because obviously a field researcher has to be able to cover different firms and shouldn't be traveling right across town. So each field researcher will have 2 areas, and then we went about the following process to identify these areas. So field supervisors, they went right across the towns or the cities that we had selected. Then periodically they would stop, they would drop a pin, so that is kind of record the specific location, GPS coordinates, and then they would describe what they saw in terms of businesses. Of course, they would see some shops, but did they also see factories? Did they see small manufacturing places? Did they see any agri-processing? So we got lists and lists of descriptions of different places. In total, we had 200 area descriptions, which were very detailed. Some of them were almost half a page explaining exactly what was to be seen in that place. So then the 200 descriptions, we had to pre-select those that we thought would be most useful or interesting for the study. We chose the following, we scored these places, and those with light manufacturing and agri-businesses, they got high score because both the 2 areas we're most interested in. And then the areas with a wider range of businesses. So, not, for instance, light manufacturing, some places only have metalworks, but others also had carpentry and had production of construction materials, or had some soap making, leather. So the more different types, the more attractive the area would be for our study, and they got a higher score. In Addis Ababa, we're also selecting some special cases. We wanted to include industrial park, 1 case, and 2 industrial villages. So these were also pre-selected, even though they're probably less varied in terms of businesses. So out of the 202 area descriptions we had, we selected the 45 most interesting cases. And then we moved on to a stage where we made a big map. We used Google Maps, and we showed the different locations and the description. And then we made final choices based on getting a good spread across town. So like areas that were very close together, we would only choose 1 of the 2. And then, as I said, in Addis Ababa, we selected 2 industrial villages, and also in very different places, and 1 industrial park. And in the 3 locations, so in Dir Dawa, Adama, Bishoftu, and Addis Ababa, we made sure that there were some cases of leather businesses, soap producing businesses, businesses doing construction materials, and garments. And to be honest, there's also in all 3 locations things like carpentry and metalworks. Anyway, so ideally we will be able to sample some across those type of businesses so that we can compare if there's any differences in being a leather company in Dire Dawa or in Addis Ababa. So we ended up with 21 locations, and that is because we want 10 locations in Addis Ababa, because there will be 5 field researchers, so that will be roughly half the total sample. 6 locations in Adama, Bishoftu, so that's actually 3 in Adama, 1 in Mojo, and 2 in Bishoftu. And the final 5 locations are in Dire Dawa. Then when we had selected the most interesting areas, we still had to define what would be the limits of these areas. We did that in also using Google Maps. So here is an example. We looked very carefully at Google Maps in the option of streets, and also the option of satellite, to understand where there were businesses, where residential areas started, or maybe even commercial areas first, as you can see that. And then we used an option in Google Maps, which is called destination, I think. And then with that, we made an itinerary, sort of a circle, a walking circle. And that results in these blue dotted lines. And so the blue dots, that's the outer extreme of the area where we will be sampling. So now we get to the third stage of sampling process, that is census. Actually, the first 2 stages, they have already taken place, and you are not responsible for them. But census is where your activities, where you're going to be implementing these next 3 stages. So in the census, the study will make a list of all the eligible firms in the selected areas assigned to you. In fact, the census activity will be almost to comb through the areas, block by block, or even house by house, in search of all the eligible firms. You will get a very detailed explanation how you will be doing that. There's a separate video on the census. And so we expect, we expect each field researcher to do 300, list 300 small firms. And so there will be a total list of 3,000 small firms in the census. Here you see the timeline. So the red bar is where we are at the moment, in February, and then there will be 2 days of orientation. Once you get back to where you will be working, in those 2 days you will confirm the area and that you can see the outer limits and if everything is in order. And then on January 27th, and that's a Wednesday, your census work will start. And so the census will continue for another 2 weeks in February until Friday, 12th of February. You are expected to do 25 firms on each day you work on the census. In case you would get behind, or something went wrong or whatever, hopefully you can take some time on Saturday or even Sunday to ensure you complete your assignment. Now, after you have delivered a list of 300 small firms, the statistician and the IT department and the field manager and probably the supervisors, they will work on scoring those firms on your list. And according to the score, those with the highest score will make it to a shorter list and that will go to the next stage of intake. So the intake is the 4th stage in the sampling process. This is a real survey. It's not very long. It will collect the basic details about small firms. So it will be a list of 50 firms per researcher. In the intake, we will identify on top of the firm's name and the name of the manager and that kind of things. We will record how many workers there are, whether the owners are willing to participate, and the owner's gender, the time that the business has existed, main business lines, and a couple of other things. It takes about 12 minutes to complete. So we will expect 525 intake interviews to take place. You get lists of 50 intake companies each. So the intake will start on the 18th of February and it will continue for a full week after that, completing on the 26th of February. During the intake, we expect you to do 10 interviews per day. They're very short interviews. Most of your time you'll be searching for the right person to get an appointment with them. So in total, you'll be doing 50 intake interviews according to the list that you get. So after the intake, we will again score the results, and then the final phase of the sampling process will start. It is the recruitment. So those that have the best scores of the intake interviews, they will be on your list for recruiting. Recruitment actually means that it's effectively the confirmation of those small firms that have been selected. You will approach them and you will go through some stages of consent process and you will explain everything. This is actually explained in another video by my colleague Guy Stewart. In total, there will be 170 firms recruited across the country, maybe even a little bit more. Here you can see on 3rd of March, recruitment starts. We are expecting to use a full week for that. Of course, you only get about 17 firms each. As I said, it will be about 170 small firms across the whole country. So that is a whole week is quite a lot of time to sign these people up. However, there might be some firms on your list who decide that they don't want to participate or they need some time to think about it. So you will need that whole week. After that, there will be the next stages of another training, the second training on the diaries methodology. And after that, the diaries process will start. Here you can see the planning. We expect the second training to start halfway the day on Wednesday, and on Wednesday 10th, and then it will continue until Saturday noon on the 13th of March. So, and then on the 15th of March, the diaries process will really start and it will continue for a full year. So, thank you for your time.